Give yourself permission to feel whatever you're feeling. You're never bad. And get the word good and bad out of your vocabulary. There is no such thing as good or bad. It simply is. And what do I do with it? So know that there's always room for growth. There's always opportunity, that there are people who can listen and people who can be there for you, and that you're not alone.
So we live in the age of quantified self. As I talk to you wearing my Whoop and my Aura, and I do the genetic testing and the lab work, I do it all. And it's incredibly powerful. And there are many insights that I take with me every day that I find very valuable. But with that said, we don't really talk enough about mental, emotional, and spiritual health, in my opinion. What's your take?
Well, I think that what's beautiful about this is that we have so many tools, so much science that has come forward to help us navigate our feelings. And that's really what we experience every day is how we feel. That's all we really know is how we feel. But what's interesting is that we've quantified it rather than also give it some quality or qualifications, and understanding that nothing is separate. And our experience of ourselves and our world is based on our feelings. We're sentient beings. We have a system of senses that alerts our mind and our internal mechanism of how to adapt to our world. And so we live in this world, the scientific world, that's separated mind, body, and spirit, where they're really interconnected. And when we start approaching it in an interconnected way, like saying, oh, I have an aura ring. And so, okay, my sleep was off. Well, what could it have been? Right? Is it my nervous system? Well, what's going on with my nervous system? Well, I've been really upset about something. I've been really stressed about something. So right there, we have a quantifiable tool that we can then use diagnostically with ourselves. It's not just about, oh, what did I eat? Or, I didn't, I was looking at my electronics before going to bed, but also, what am I feeling emotionally? How am I feeling safe? Am I feeling loved? Am I feeling okay within myself? So I think I would like to see a world where everything is combined and no longer separate.
A big topic of yours is resilience. And can we talk about how emotional and spiritual health influence resilience?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I'd like to step back. I'd like to first acknowledge that everybody is resilient. It's not just only a subset of people are resilient. Everyone is resilient. And for me, resilience is a spectrum. That, we have the people who are extremely resilient, and then there's people who are losing resilience and becoming more burnt out. So it's a spectrum. And most of us are somewhere in the middle. Though when we don't lead healthy lifestyles and have healthy thoughts and all that sort of thing, our resilience starts to fade. It starts going down the other side of the spectrum towards illness or burnout versus fitness and flourishing and vibrancy and vitality, which we'd like to get to. So the question is, in that spectrum, what does it take to be really adaptable, flexible, pliable, so that when I'm met with adversity, I can bounce back even better than before? That's what vitality is. That's what flourishing means and resilience. So to get there, for me, there are 6 pillars that are involved. One being physical vitality, which is, I guess, fairly obvious in that if I'm not feeling well, then it's very hard for me to handle challenges. The other one that most people talk about is our mental capacity, our mental grit, ability to be aware and open and have a growth mindset. So many psychologists talk about that. But the next one is really about being able to step outside of our emotions and use our emotions as signals to help us manage our world as opposed to our emotions managing us, which is what normally happens. So our emotional well-being, our emotional equilibrium is our third pillar for me in the 6 pillars of resilience that I talk about. The fourth pillar is our relationships. And again, that will also bring in our emotional health, our spiritual health, and our connection to one another, our connections to ourselves. So relationships is the fourth pillar. And the fifth pillar is our spiritual connection, which essentially means that we have an innate desire to have a sense of belonging and the profound sense of belonging to something greater than, be it nature, religion, a sense of purpose or passion. We all know that that confers better health, more resilience, and more longevity when we have a sense of a strong spiritual connection. So that's the fifth pillar. And the sixth pillar sort of combines it all in understanding that we don't live in isolation, that we ourselves are leaders and we take responsibility for that, and how we feel and how our world and our actions impact others. So that, to me, is the 6 pillars. So emotional health and spiritual health are 2 of the main pillars.
And it feels like purpose is the connective thread there.
Yeah, I would say love is the connected thread
Tell me more. Yeah.
because purpose falls into that sense of love for me. Right? For me, love is a state where we feel connected, we feel purposeful, we feel grateful, we feel appreciative, but we also when we love ourselves, we want to take care of ourselves. We want the best food in our system, the best people around us. We want to feel like we can flourish, right? When we love others, we support, we care, we do service. We volunteer, we feel like we have purpose. And love is also something that connects us, to all things, to spiritually. So I in my first book, The Love Response, I called it the love pyramid, where we have social love, self-love, and spiritual love that allows us to really thrive.
So, in your view, is love, we tend to, in our world and the way we look at medicine here at mindbodygreen, we love to, not just look at symptoms, but identify root causes, whether that's, I'm eating too much sugar or I'm not exercising enough. In your view, as it relates to emotional and spiritual well being, is love often the cause for what's ailing us? Whether it's,
Or lack thereof.
yes,
Yes. Yeah, I think and I think also when you look at the research and you look at even like the emotional vocabulary wheel, the there are 2 ways that, basically all words or emotions can go down one path or the other, and they either go down the path of fear or the path of love, right? And then they actually meet at the base, again, through love, right? So if you can have excitement or anxiety, which kind of have the same root, right? They both have sort of an adrenaline rush, but you put one through love and it can go through gratitude and compassion and connection. You put one through fear and it becomes anxiety and nervousness and overwhelm, right? And they can meet, especially the fear cycle meets a shame. Well, eventually we say, well, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me that I feel this way? It must be me, which is what a child's mind might do. And so again, we meet that with love. We meet that with compassion. And that moves into a place of courage, a place of understanding, a place of empathy. So usually our emotional well-being is either based on the presence of love or the absence of love.
a lot to unpack there. Where I go, you mentioned words. I think of word choice. How do you think about the words you choose when you're speaking to yourself or to others?
Words are very important. So for many reasons. And what I would invite the listeners to do is to connect with the feeling, the sensation, the energy, the vibration of a given word. So, this is an example I use frequently. Say a sentence that uses the word should, like, I should have exercised. I shouldn't have eaten that food that made my aura ring, results off, whatever. So, we do it all of the time. So you can probably think of something right now that you shouldn't have done or you should be doing. And so just say that sentence to yourself and notice what happens in your chest. Notice what it feels like. Does it feel open or closed, relaxed, tight, heavy, or light? I should have exercised. I shouldn't have eaten that. I should be calling my mother, whatever that may be. The guilt or shame that comes along with it creates a contraction. So our words create a physiological response that will show up as a physical sensation. Remember, our sensations inform our brain, which will be a contracted state. In that contracted state, imagine the brain's contracting as well. The likelihood of me now doing whatever it is I shouldn't have done, I don't know. It feels a little bit insurmountable. But feel into it. Don't just listen to my words. I should have or I shouldn't have. It's a very contracted state. Now you just change that word, same sentence, and just change the word to could. I could have. I could have exercised. I could have eaten differently. What happens? My heart opens. Everything kind of eases a little bit. I'm still taking accountability, so there's still courage there, but I'm meeting it with compassion and using the word could as a completely different vibration, a completely different physical experience, physiological experience. And now my brain is looking at this differently. Okay. So our words carry sensation with them that then impacts us physically and physiologically, and then impacts our decisions, how we view things, our perception. So it is important to be aware of our words.
What other word swaps come to mind for you? Could versus should makes a lot of sense. I'm assuming can't is up there. That's what comes to mind.
There's words that are connected with limiting beliefs, right? Shouldn't, could, I can't, I never. So when I work with people on the pillars, and especially on mental clarity and openness connected to emotional equilibrium, we want to look at what creates this contracted state where I go into a limited belief system of or victim where nothing is possible and I never and this always happens to me. All or nothing statements, catastrophizing, these are all representative of we call cognitive distortions or beliefs that incurred when we were much younger, when we didn't have a brain that really understood what was going on, and we start with our sort of a default mode of I never, I can't, I shouldn't, I wouldn't, which is again based in a non-belief of possibility, right? So when we shift those words into words that are more open, less stressful, less stress provoking, not necessarily Pollyanna, I don't know that I can do something, but I know that I can try. I'm speaking truth according to what I know, as opposed to what I might be projecting based from a negative lens. So that can change things. And just from a thing, so that's an example of I can't to I can try, or I can give it my best effort. Let's see what happens. The other one that I like, and again, this is just the experience of I have people like to notice the physical body when you say something. And people love the word imagination. Use your imagination. And when I say that, okay, well, go use your imagination. What happens? Well, for me, it feels like a little bit of a block. Like imagination, what does that mean? I have to think about what imagination is. So it's imagination is actually a word that creates separation. It's separating my mind, my body, and my spirit. Another word is go into an experience of awe and curiosity, right? And in this state of awe, oh, now imagination or whatever you want to call it starts happening because I'm in this open state. So we want to think about what is it that I ultimately want to feel when I use a word. So think about the feeling before you think about the word, and then you'll get the right word.
So how do you mentioned, being Pollyannish, and I have, but I also I think of affirmations because they're a tool where language is essentially the core of affirmations. And what does a researcher like yourself think about affirmations, and what is a little bit woo woo, and what does the science say? Going back to language and the power it has.
Well, so, it's funny because I like to give them a different name. I call them positive verbal commands
Sounds more scientific to me. I'll take that.
because that's really what they are. So it's kind of like there is science to some of this, like fake it till you make it, right? If I say it enough times, then it'll become true, which is absolutely true because our thoughts become our reality in that respect. There's, in my experience, I talk about this not only just from a clinician and a person who's researching, but also from my own personal experiences because have gone through periods of depression and sadness and loneliness and all those sorts of things. And when I started, I realized that my self-worth was on the floor. So I would say these affirmations, I love myself, I love myself, I love myself. And that the other side of me would say, no, you don't, no, you don't. And would have like literally this argument inside of myself. But eventually the no, you don't got quieter. Now, having said that, what I find to be more effective than an affirmation on its own is an affirmation or positive verbal command that comes alongside the experience, right? Why do I talk and teach and tell people feel, 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 feel? Because the felt experience is what you know. The felt experience is what allows the brain to remember. The words themselves, not always so touchable, so applicable. So if I say I love myself and then I put myself in my happy place. I imagine I'm running in a field with my favorite niece and we're laughing hysterically, a time when I felt alive and vital and loved. And then I say, I love myself, I love myself, I love myself. Then my brain connects the feeling, the experience with the words. And if I keep doing that and I say those words again later, it's going to evoke that memory. So I'm more likely to have this work if I connected with a positive memory, a positive experience. And that's why I bring in these verbal commands, these affirmations in meditative experiences where I call that, experiencing that love or the love response, bringing in the words to match, doing it repeatedly. So over time, I can say the words and they'll elicit the reaction that I seek.
So, what's possible here as it relates to if we're really, and I love positive verbal command over affirmation. So, if we're really enacting our positive verbal commands and we're really dialing into feeling, let's say in the context of healing, what do we know? What does the research say? What's possible in terms of that impact and our ability to heal?
What we know about the placebo is what we know. Right? So the placebo response is studied in medicine, looking at whether a medication or a procedure works. So they put it up according to the actual procedure, let's say acupuncture with a sham procedure or a drug against a sugar pill. And what they found in this research is that they call it placebo, where the placebo pill actually creates the same effects as the medication might or the procedure. Why is this so? So that's what's been studied over years and years of looking at what happens when that placebo response is activated. And what we know is that the dopaminergic reward system in the brain is activated to elicit a belief in anything is possible. And that actually then is manifested in the body. And so in Western medicine, their tendency is to say, oh, that's placebo, which they see as a negative thing. Whereas in our world, we see it as a positive thing, as the power of the mind to create a reality in the body. Now, there's also the nocebo effect, which is the negative thinking that create negative outcome, which has also been studied to be can be sometimes true as well. Again, what this is pointing to us is that the power of our thoughts, the power of our beliefs to create a different outcome physically within ourselves, which I've seen probably thousands of times in my 30 years of practice.
What's one that comes to mind immediately that sticks with you that you think really stands out?
Oh, but there's been so many, but I really love talking about this one because I still think like, how is this possible? But this is years ago. I was actually just starting. Oh, I think the love response had just come out. And a monk found me. He had he had just had a heart attack. He had been walking down Newbury Street and had this massive cardiac arrest. A nurse happened to be standing behind him and started resuscitation. He had a triple bypass, what have you. There still were, I think, one or two vessels that still had clots, but they got the ones that were most important. And as he's sitting in the hospital, he's, decides that he needs to get some spiritual help on his heart. And he somehow, I don't know if we had Google back then, but he found me. And so here I am working with a monk who to me already had a spiritual practice, but he didn't have the spiritual practice around love. He didn't have a practice around, healing his heart and healing a lot of the hurt and trauma he had growing up. Now, we did work on other things, given that he had diabetes and all these things. We looked at nutrition, we looked at everything. But the major work that was done was healing his heart. A lot of the work was around his heart. And 9 months later, he had no vessel disease. What they were going to go back to get these other vessels, and there was nothing to go back to.
So I can't help but think this is a monk. So he's been maybe not in the context of healing himself from heart disease, but he's been working out these muscles. He's been going to the spiritual gym every day. With that said, how can we, I think it's very hard to just like turn on anything overnight. Whether it's you're going to run a marathon, you can't just decide to do it. You got to run a little bit every day. With that in mind, how can our listeners start to work on these spiritual muscles so they feel better prepared or equipped to use them in a situation that really requires them in a way? And so, what do you recommend?
It's a really good question, and also why I got into what I do, because it wasn't also easy for me in the beginning, especially with my scientific questioning mind. And I don't know about this. And also because, I'm busy, and I thought, how can we make this accessible. There's so many people who've written self-help books or spiritual guidebooks and spiritual gurus everywhere, and yet you look around and nobody's accessing this. And so I really felt there was a mission for me to make it accessible and to make it practical and to be able to access it every day. And so the first thing we start with is self-awareness, is noticing how I feel with my words, with people, with food, and paying attention to the physical body. When I have this thought versus this thought, what does it feel like? And do I like that feeling? Right? So fear does not motivate. I mean, it will initially motivate an action. No, like you should do this and you might do it once, but it's not sustainable. What's going to sustain something is something that feels good and is something that is easily trainable or accessible in your everyday life. So the first step I find to bringing people closer towards spirituality is the mindfulness practice, is daily starting to pay attention without judgment, with open awareness. How am I feeling? It's not good. It's not bad. I'm just noticing. And so then I start taking a shower mindfully. And I start walking mindfully or I start eating mindfully. And in that practice, I'm not thinking about yesterday or tomorrow. I'm fully present, just noticing. And maybe I only do it for a minute. Maybe I start with 30 seconds and then I go for 5 minutes. So, what I encourage people to do is to just bring in these practices where we're being mindful, being present with openness and curiosity, maybe 3 times a day. And then maybe we pay attention to our breath. So, I have people do like a breath practice every hour in the hour. Just set your little watch or timer to do a breath. So you're just paying attention to how does that feel when I do this? And then we say, well, how does it feel when I use this word versus that word? And as we start paying more attention, we start finding, wow, that feels a lot better. I'm actually communicating differently. I'm interacting with people differently. Then we can bring in maybe a little meditation in the morning or at night. Start with 5 minutes, start with 3 minutes. So there's little things that we could do throughout our day that can enhance our sense of connection and spirituality, even just spending time out in nature.
Jason Walkup here, founder and co-CEO of mindbodygreen and the host of the mindbodygreen podcast. Please subscribe. You'll never miss a show and you won't regret it. And I'm assuming this better awareness of being connected to our feelings in the moment will help us with our stress response system, which is something you've extensively studied and written about, because stress obviously affects the body, but our ability to retrain our response in our world has an incredible impact.
Absolutely. Well, just remember that without stress, we'd be dead.
Sure.
Again, let's change our narrative of not looking at everything as negative or should, or if I don't do this, I'm going to die, I'm going to be sick. That this whole narrative that we have from like the Western mindset, I would like to see change to one of possibility, to one of, oh, okay, well, what can I do about it? Right. So stress is just life. Stress is a term of physics. It's the body realizing that you're in a state, or the brain realizing you're in a state of lack. Okay. Being hungry is a stress. Being cold is a stress. It's just a state of lack. And then the body needs to figure out how to adapt to that state of lack, to fill the gap, to get back into balance. It's what we call, well, it's looking for homeostasis, which is a steady state, but allostasis is a state, the ability to achieve stability through change, right? So you just shifted positions. Why did you shift positions?
Well, I'm 6'7" and chairs and me sometimes require adjustment.
You were uncomfortable. It's just that simple, right? I I felt uncomfortable. So we had this incredibly amazing sensory system that from your butt muscle said, oh, I'm going to atrophy if I don't move. It started getting tingling or discomfort and sent messages to your brain. And the brain then initiated a response for the muscles to move and to shift positions so that you can get comfortable again. That's allostasis, the ability to achieve stability through change. We do it 24/7, knowingly and unknowingly, constantly shifting, adapting. It's this mind body system is so brilliant. It's just this energy system that's interacting and shifting and adapting so that we can stay alive and here. And so stress is life. Without it, you wouldn't be in existence. Now the problem is whether or not you can adapt. That's when it becomes a problem, whether if the stress is too high or you don't have the resources to adapt. That's when it becomes a problem, because the stress response, this automatic and unconscious response that's responding to the stress, is firing. adrenaline, cortisol, heart rate going up, blood pressure going up, muscles tensing, all those physiological changes that occur when the response is activated. And normally, in the good scenario, when the stress is manageable, that response is activated. We take care of the stress. I shifted positions, and now the response is extinguished. But if that stress continues and is not deactivated, then that response stays up. So the stress creates more stress and so on and so forth. Our beliefs alone can create that response. Our thoughts alone can create response, just like we notice with the should versus could. So being aware of that and knowing that I have the ability to control it more effectively. So I can live a life of more flow rather than resistance is huge.
I tend to think we almost have an epidemic of mindset here.
Yes.
What do you think? And I'll put aside for lack of a better word, real stress. I think of, the god awful floods in Texas where children, like just absolutely devastating. Last night, our 6-year-old daughter, we don't know how to answer this, asked about it. She heard about it at camp and said, "Why did God let that happen?" We're just like blown away that she asked this at 6, and it's a good question, and we didn't really have a good answer for her. So I'll just park that as real stress. And then there's everyday BS stress, if you will. The cost of living in 2025. For the cost of living in 2025 stress, in your view, what's so devoid? Like, what are we missing here that it's become an epidemic? Is it a lack of awareness, a lack of connection, a lack of purpose? Are we numb? Is it like you've been doing this for a while.
I have it's a really good question, and I want to talk about everything here. I want to talk about your daughter too. Look, I want to step back and say talk about real stress for a minute. That is life. Okay? Our ancestors lived in this all the time, and our brain was wired to be aware of that. And so the ability to be resilient is being able to flourish and feel vitality despite that kind of stress. Or as a result, it's like post-traumatic growth versus post-traumatic stress, right? It's not that we like it. It's not that we want it to happen. It's just that it will. Nature just as soon lets a forest fire burn as a flower bloom. This happens. The question is, do I have the cushion, the wiggle room, the wherewithal to handle it and to keep going? So that's real. And that's how we've been designed to be able to handle those things. However, going back to the way we are today, when we chip away at the things that we evolved with that supported us to be able to handle difficult challenges, and at the same time, we also accumulated things we didn't have, right? People didn't live very long back then either. We live much longer now. So to think of what are the resources that we're not accessing that can support us, that give us the cushion to handle these very stressful situations that will happen. It's not about saying, oh my, can you believe that? Yeah, I can believe it happened. I had a house fire, I lost everything. Everything. No renter's insurance, in 30 years ago. It happens. And yet we keep going. So that's the beauty of the spirit, the triumph of the spirit. How do we get that spirit to be larger and greater so that it can handle these catastrophic events? Now, the way we live our lives now, I think it eats away at that cushion. It eats away at that capacity to really handle things because we don't spend enough time in nature, because we spend too much time on the screen, because we get caught up in outcomes versus process, because we're not really fully present, because we're more concerned about what other people say versus what they don't, because we've gotten into a world where it's most based on fear than based on love, and disconnection versus connection. So there's many different reasons because of the way we eat. We eat these fast foods and things with a million different um, ingredients that we can't spell. We've left the earth. We've left our connection to the earth, our connection to that something greater. And that disconnection creates a sense of separateness and lack of love, which wisdom traditions have been talking about for centuries, right? The biggest source of suffering is the belief that we're separate. And so everything that creates that sense of separation, the anxiety, the fear, the foods that we're eating, depending on your genetics and how you metabolize and you methylate and the neurotransmitters that end up then affecting your brain and the gut brain connection, and whether or not you spend time outside and whether or not you exercise and whether you spend time with people you love and how much screen time you do, all that eats away at that cushion, which is why I said resilience is a spectrum. Because when we add those things in, it's not about what you shouldn't be doing, it's what you can be doing. Then we create this cushion that allows us to mitigate uncertainty more effectively.
Well, you've said, and I'll quote, "Am I living my life in fear of dying, or am I living my life because I want to live?"
That's right. And I remember saying that for the first time. It was 2003, and I was working with a patient who had breast cancer, and she did not want to go the allopathic route. She didn't want to get chemotherapy or surgery. And I said, I'm not going to sway you one way or another. I just want to make sure that you're not doing this out of fear, but you're doing this because she was really anti-Western medicine, really anti-established medicine. There's just a lot of negativity around it. And so I said, I really want to make sure that you are making this decision because you truly want to live, not because there's fear here. And I said, most people come here because they have a fear of dying. Most people go to a doctor or go do anything because of a fear of dying. But what if you really chose to want to live your life fully and expressively and joyfully without that fear? It's not that fear is in there, but you just want to live as richly as possible. What would your choice be?
Powerful. I think a lot of people feel that way come middle age, and I think, unfortunately, many people have their health awakening due to a scary health event or a lab that comes back abnormal in a way that's frightening, and they get scared straight, where there's some benefit to that,
Yeah, absolutely. It's motivating.
but you gotta flip it. So you mentioned methylation. I have, like, off the charts poor methylation. My homocysteine was 63, which is so high, it's like, I'm lucky to be alive. Now it's, still high, but manageable. It's low double digits. It's like 12. So that was like one of my moments of many throughout my health history where I said, "Holy cow, I need to take care of this. I want to be alive." Got young kids.
Well, that's the thing. It's a great motivator.
But then you need to flip the narrative quickly though. Versus I don't want to die to
But that's not sustainable because eventually you do what you need to do and then you get bored. You don't do it anymore. I can't tell you many people got motivated to do the work and then they fall off the wagon. Oh, my numbers are fine now, or I'm taking a medication, or whatever that may be, because it feels like the changes that they've made are work. It's not. It's not like haven't become natural things that are fun and a way of coping and a way of being. And so that's why, again, fear motivates us. It is necessary. Anger is motivating. Anger is actually the most active and powerful force of change that there is. So that's how we use those emotions. It's just not sustainable to live in fear.
where I go with this is, am I fearing this, piece of ribeye I'm eating, or am I savoring it?
That's right.
And that's going to we're looking at the same thing, like, I'm not denying that for some people, saturated fat can kill you, but how we're receiving that experience, if it's out of fear or joy, impacts how we process that.
Right. And think about the perfect storm, right? It's sort of like, what are the combinations of things? Disease just doesn't happen. It takes a while. It's sort of a combination of things that lead the system to break, right? So then if it can break, we can also right it. We can allow it to sort of right itself. And, I think this reminds me of Mimi Guarneri wrote the book The Heart Speaks, and she quoted this study, and I can't remember it offhand, but I believe the study started in the 70s, I believe, and it was a small town in New Jersey where people smoke. They
Oh, Rosetto.
Yes, 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 and there was sort of no incidence of heart disease. Then, whatever many years later, the only thing that shifted was the sense of community had broken.
Yes.
And now they had the same levels of heart disease as the rest of the country.
Yeah.
So again, pointing to this notion of love, right? Whether it's love in a sense of gratitude and savoring and connection, or love with people, that we're communing with. or loving ourselves or loving nature. It's that saying like, "Oh, how wonderful is this?" And also the likelihood of me eating that entire ribeye versus a little bit of that ribeye because I'm mindfully eating and I'm enjoying it and I'm full more quickly. So there's so many other things. Again, it's a perfect storm. There's behaviors, there's mindset, there's choices, and again, physiological responses. We know, for instance, that, like, let's say just taking the emotion of shame versus guilt. Okay. Again, I have to research and find this study. I quoted it a long time ago. I think it's in the love response. But they looked at what happens to the stress response as far as inflammation goes with guilt versus shame. Now, guilt is actually an appropriate emotion because it supports the survival of the species. It keeps us from doing a negative behavior again that would either hurt us or hurt someone else. It's the behavior. So I feel badly about that behavior. Shame is the internalization of that behavior. I am bad. Okay. That actually causes inflammation.
Inflammation, cornerstone of autoimmune. And you've worked with a lot of people who've reversed autoimmune. What do people tend to have in common?
Lack of self love.
Interesting.
Well, it's self attacking self.
It's interesting. I spoke to someone once off the record who is very, very much on the cutting edge in terms of peptides and all sorts of alternative treatments as it relates to people suffering from Lyme, which, Lyme scares the hell out of me. I like it. It does.
Well, I mean, I used to love walking in the grass. So, you know.
I live in Miami now, so we're done with Lyme. Got to worry about other critters, but he had a very similar answer that those who seem to struggle the most are really suffering mentally and emotionally. And those who aren't tend to get over it quickly. Obviously, it's a generalization, not the case for everybody, but I thought it's very similar to what you said as it relates to autoimmune.
Yeah, very, very often. And it'll go to different parts of the body depending on other issues also. So I find like people with ulcerative colitis might have a sort of a different take on things versus people with lupus or rheumatoid arthritis. So
Look, I get the rub here in that for someone suffering, it's really difficult. Many doctors look at you like you're crazy. And you can't say to someone, well, it's in your head. That's going to just set someone off because it's very real and it's not. But like where I'm going is it feels like a protocol for healing, no matter how dialed in you are on all the latest technology and protocols, is addressing your mental, emotional, and spiritual health. They should go in tandem.
absolutely. And what should go in tandem with everything, and like I said, everything meets at compassion. Everything. We address everything with compassion. I address my joint pain with compassion. Not like, oh, I need to get rid of this pain. Say, oh, let me love my body. Let me love this area. Oh, let me give space for you to feel this way. I'm not going to push you away. I'm going to give you space. When I give somebody space, like they're telling me something, and I listen with compassion, that's 50% of the healing process. Is giving the space to feel something and not try to condense it and push it away. So I think what I'd like to see is compassion coming through in everything.
So where I struggle with this is, and I don't think I'm alone here, is letting go, releasing my attachment to the outcome. But at the same time, I have the mindset of, we're going to do this. We're going to figure this out. The joint pain will disappear or whatever it is might be. And in my experience, that's a real tension. Sometimes you can power through something. And that's the magic of who I am and who many goal-oriented people are. You power through, you figure out a way. But also, you need to know when to let go.
Yeah, look, I think these are all very true and true words, and so much to unpack here. And one being, it's not who you are. Okay, it's none of this is who you are. It's your tendency. Your tendency is to go towards goals, and your tendency is to feel better when you can reach a goal and feel valued that way. That's your tendency because you learn that that's what your dopaminergic reward system goes, gaga when you achieve something. So yeah, of course you're going to be your tendency is going to be goal oriented because that's how you get your thrills. That's how you feel good.
But also just to it makes me feel empowered.
That's right.
I have the mindset of like, this didn't like, I can do this.
That's right. But that's what I'm trying to get at. This taking it away from the I, okay? Look, I was in a car accident when I was 15. I had hip surgery when I was 8. I had, I experienced chronic pain until probably 15 years ago when I was able to that's again why I got into this, was to be able to look at everything mind, body, spirit. And even now, the past 3 or 4 months, I overdid something and, strained my iliacus, which is in my hip. And this notion again of going back into old patterns, I'm goal oriented, I'm going to fix this. The pain's going to go away. And what it did was make it worse. Instead of saying, okay, I give, right? I'm going to loosen my grip on the outcome, knowing that the body has a miraculous ability to heal itself. I'm going to trust in this process and let go. It doesn't mean non action of what are my goals. I still have goals. But what I start with is the vision. So any successful CEO, as you know, you start with a vision. You don't start with a goal, you start with a vision. What do I want to feel like? So what I want to do is not get rid of the pain. What I want to do is I want to feel vitality and youthfulness and the pliability and flexibility and the ability to run around with my 6-year-old nephew. That's what I want to feel. So I focus on that because that is a goal, because then I can make the goals attainable to that as opposed to goals of getting rid of something because that's going through lack. So there's a fear of I don't want to be in pain that got me motivated. But now I'm switching over into what is it that I really want? And now I can go into that because there's no attachment there. It's just like it's a truth.
So you mentioned your nephew. As I've explained, I've got a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old, 2 girls. I think about them all the time, and I think about mindset, how I communicate. So there's some days I think I'm fantastic. There are other days I say, I'll say should have. I should have done that a lot differently. I should have used different language. I could have, So how do you think about kids and mindset and how we communicate and the words we should be encouraging them to use every day in their lives?
Well, look, first of all, we could be using, and we also want to make mistakes in front of them so they could see how we correct them. I think that's really important. It's really important to be yourself and to self-correct because then they learn that it's possible to self-correct, that mistakes happen and we fall and we get back up and we self-correct and we learn and we grow. And this is what I call the opportunity mindset. So like I said, I look at mindset a little bit differently than some of the grit people and the growth mindset people because I wanted to open it up a little bit to where's the opportunity here? Yeah, I made a mistake. Where's the opportunity for learning? So it's being able to sit with your kids. In my case, it was my nephew and niece and say, okay, what's the opportunity here? What can we learn from this? How can we get stronger? How can we get smarter? How can we become richer from this experiences?
And if someone is listening who, coming back to, well said, I find myself apologizing to my children more frequently. Uh, something I've learned. Uh, if someone's listening who they find themselves with this, maybe they're a little bit defeated. They did a genetic test or there's a lab, and the first thing, well, this runs in my family. There's a lot therapeutically one can do now, which I think is amazing as it relates to science and technology. But let's go, as we believe things need to go in tandem. How can we adjust that mindset, that narrative, when that thought enters their brain as they're reading their, Quest labs or whatever it might be?
hmm First, I would say feel it. You're not bad for feeling the way you do. So that's where we meet your feeling with compassion. So I like the Christine Neff's self-compassion break. You place a hand on your heart. You breathe in and say, I just am breathing in compassion for myself for having this fear and feeling this feeling. I have every right to feel the way I do. I have a practice that I call the shield, which is a, um, a visualization, a mnemonic, which is just slow down and honor the way I feel. Just honor the way you feel. That's okay. I'm not going to try to push this away and say everything's okay. Right now, it doesn't feel fine, and I can feel that way right now. And then you start breathing in and out, in and out. Okay, what's the opportunity here? What are my options? What the opportunity? Remembering that just because a disease has entered the body doesn't mean it will manifest itself. There are a lot of variables that come into play whether or not something will manifest. And that's where we have the power. We have the power to shift things. It's like, again, it think something happens because of a perfect storm. I call it wiggle room, right? And as we age, and if we don't take care of ourselves and all these different types of things, it limits our wiggle room so that when big things happen, we don't have the capacity, the bandwidth to handle it. So it's about expanding our wiggle room so that this maybe genetic marker doesn't have as big of a role.
So if you could wave your magic wand and get funding and unlimited resources for any study, you could make it happen tomorrow, what would it be?
That's a good question. I used to have so many. There would be so many things. This is the reason I sort of hesitate. Is well, I'm closer to 60 now than I was in my 30s and 40s. And when I was younger, there were so many things that I wanted to study. I just kept coming up with different grand ideas every single time. And now I find that when I start focusing on one thing, there's other things that I want to look at as well. But I would really like to look at that shifting of mindset to a place of love. When we can in small amounts get people to shift their focus to that place of presence and love, how does this offset the physiological response? We have so many, we can you probably easily do it. I mean, I do it all the time with my little aura ring and whatever else I might put on, and I can see the changes that can be made through my own practice, but I'm adept at it. I've been doing it for 30 years. So I'd love to see sort of how incorporating this love, this compassion on a regular basis over time can offset these changes.
So is love the key to longevity?
Yeah, but for me, love has many forms. So I think, love is the key to it's not to for me, it's not longevity. It's to having a full and rich life. It's not a long life necessarily. I mean, I don't want to live a long time if I'm suffering. So that's who cares? Right? For me, the key to having a full, rich life so that every moment I want to be here and every moment I want to experience it. That's what I'm looking for. I want what she's having kind of thing.
We have covered so much ground today. In addition to picking up one of your numerous books, which we will link to in the show notes, any words of wisdom or advice for listeners before we wrap?
Yeah, well, I do want to actually mention I just completed a couple weeks ago a 10-week online course called The Foundations of Mastering Resilience. So for those people who are feeling that they're at their wits' end and burnt out or seeking to be more resilient and into more of a flourishing state, it's a 10-week course, which I'm really proud of. And it's available on Learn World. So there's that. So that's one. And the other thing that I would say to people is give yourself permission to feel whatever you're feeling. You're never bad. There's no, and get the word good and bad out of your vocabulary. There's no such thing as good or bad. It simply is. And what do I do with it? So know that there's always room for growth. There's always opportunity in there, that there are people who can listen and people who can be there for you, and that you're not alone.
Well said. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been great.